My stepdad cut me out of his will and treated me like an outsider. Now he and my mom are suing after I inherited millions alone. When I was 14, my life took a sharp turn. My mom decided it was time to settle down again, this time with a man who already had a son from his previous marriage. He was 17, 3 years older than me, and let's just say we didn't exactly hit it off from the start. The ink wasn't even dry on their marriage certificate when tension began to brew. At first, it was the small stuff petty arguments you'd expect when you throw strangers into a house and tell them they're family now. He would leave his dirty dishes in the sink as if they would magically clean themselves, and I would be the one getting an earful about the mess in the kitchen. Or I'd find my shampoo mysteriously vanishing faster than usual, only to see my new stepbrother sporting what looked suspiciously like my favorite hair product. It wasn't just the antics of my stepbrother that bothered me, it was how my stepdad handled things. He had this way of assuming I was the root of all problems. If something was out of place, somehow it was my doing. Mom wasn't much help either. She was so caught up in trying to make this new family work that she overlooked the obvious, always smoothing things over and making excuses for why my stepbrother could do no wrong. A year into this new family setup, Mom and Stepdad had news they were expecting. That's when the dynamic really shifted. Suddenly, it was all about preparing for the new baby. The house needed redecorating, and guess whose room was conveniently chosen for the nursery? Yep, mine. I got shuffled to the smaller guest room, which barely had space for my stuff. It felt like a demotion, a clear message about where I stood in this family hierarchy. As my new half-brother grew up, it became apparent that he was the golden child. My stepbrother, already spoiled, took cues from this and upped his entitled behavior, knowing he could get away with anything. He dropped out of college and came back home, bringing a whirlwind of trouble with him from late-night parties too. Dodgy friends coming and going at all hours. Complaints were met with a shrug from my stepdad and sorrowful looks from my mom, as if to say, "What can we do?" I started spending more time at friends' houses anywhere I could feel a bit normal. School became my escape. I joined clubs, stayed late for extra classes, anything to avoid going home before I absolutely had to. This wasn't just teenage rebellion, it was survival. The atmosphere at home was suffocating, like constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for the next blow-up. One particular evening stands out in my memory. I came home later than usual after a school project, and the house was quiet, which was unusual. I found a note on the fridge saying they'd gone out for dinner. Family dinner I wasn't told about. It was a simple message, but it hit me hard. It felt as if they'd forgotten I existed, unless I was there to be blamed for something. The breaking point came not long after my 18th birthday. I had saved up some money from a part-time job, Kata, despite my stepdad's complaints about how it would affect my studies, which was just another way of saying he didn't like not having me around to pin things on. I came home one day to find my room turned upside down. My stepbrother had thrown a party while the parents were out, and somehow my room became the casualty. There were beer stains on my project papers, a broken lamp, and my privacy was completely violated. I confronted them all at breakfast the next day. My stepdad's response was cold and dismissive, saying I should have been more responsible with my belongings. My mom just sighed and mentioned something about family sticking together and letting things go. But I was done letting things go. During those teenage years, it seemed like everything I did was under a microscope, but not in a caring, let's help you grow kind of way. It was more like, let's catch you doing something wrong. My stepbrother, who had become pretty much a professional couch potato, was somehow always off the hook. My little half-brother was just a kid, sure, but the amount of coddling he received made it clear who the favorites were. I remember working on a big science project that I was really excited about. I needed quiet and space, both of which were in short supply at home. I tried to carve out a small workspace in the corner of the living room, hoping for a bit of peace. But it quickly became clear that it was as chaotic as Times Square at rush hour. My stepbrother blasting music at full volume while my little brother ran around screaming and causing a ruckus. There was my step, always finding some reason to tell me to move my stuff. "You're taking up too much space," he'd say, "or your project is making a mess." It was frustrating. I felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the middle of a tornado. One day, I'd had enough. I packed up my project and marched over to a friend's house. Her parents were always welcoming, and they let me spread out my work in their quiet dining room. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I could think straight. That's when it hit me how abnormal my home life had become. My friend noticed my relief at just being able to work in peace. "You're always welcome here," she said, seeing the stress melt off me the minute I stepped into her house. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to me. It also made me realize that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. Home should be your safe place, not somewhere you escape from. I started picking up more shifts at my part-time job. If I wasn't at school or at a friend's place, I was working not just for the money, but because each hour away from home made it a little easier to breathe. My stepdad didn't like it, always ranting about how a job was distracting me from schoolwork. But I knew the real reason he didn't like it. I wasn't around as much for him to find fault with. As I saved up, the plan to move out started forming more solidly in my mind. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There was no way my mom and stepdad would take it well. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the only way I could get some control over my life. Then came the day I finally told them. I'd found a small apartment not too far from college, and it was affordable on my budget. I sat them down, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm moving out," I announced. The room went quiet, too quiet. You could cut the tension with a knife. My stepdad was the first to react. "You think you're ready to live on your own at your age?" he scoffed. My mom just sat there, looking between us with an unreadable expression on her face. "I am," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I need my own space. I've saved up enough to manage." The argument that followed was brutal. Accusations were thrown about how ungrateful I was and how I was just trying to get away from my responsibilities at home. My stepdad even tried to guilt me about leaving my little brother behind. "He looks up to you, you know," he said, as if that was enough reason for me to stay in a situation that was making me miserable. But I stood my ground. This wasn't just about wanting my own space. It was about needing it for my mental and emotional health. Over the next few days, I packed my things. Each item I put into a box felt like a tiny piece of the fortress I was building around myself. On the day I moved out, my mom came to my room. I was expecting another argument, but instead, she helped me pack. We didn't talk much, but when we did, it was superficial. "Do you need more boxes? Or I can give you some of the old kitchen stuff." It was like if we stayed on safe topics, we could avoid the massive elephant in the room. When I finally closed the door to my new apartment after moving everything in, I felt a wave of so many emotions: relief, sadness, excitement, and fear. I was on my own, now truly on my own. It was terrifying, but it was also freeing. Those first few nights were the hardest. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty. I missed even the annoying noises of my family home, well, sort of. But as days turned into weeks, I started to appreciate the peace. I could come and go as I pleased, eat when I wanted, and sleep without being disturbed. It was like discovering a new part of myself that I had kept muted for so long. Life away from home settled into a routine pretty quickly, and honestly, it was the most peace I'd had in years. My relationship with my mom and stepdad wasn't great, but it was manageable since I wasn't under their roof 24/7. I was doing my own thing, staying busy with work and college, and keeping my head down. Then, out of nowhere, my stepdad had a health scare that shook everything up. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious enough for him to start thinking about the future, specifically his will. I heard about it through my mom, who called one evening. I sensed something was off. "Your stepdad's been thinking about his will," she said, sounding a bit more somber than usual. She spoke as casually as one might talk about the weather. "He wants to make sure everything is in order." "Okay," I replied, unsure where this was going. The tone in her voice hinted it wasn't just a courtesy call to keep me in the loop. She hesitated, then continued. He's decided to include your stepbrother and your half-brother, but not you. He feels it makes more sense since they're his biological kids. There it was, the sting. Not that I was expecting anything, but hearing it laid out so bluntly was a gut punch. It wasn't the money or the potential inheritance that hurt. It was the clear message that I was an outsider in the family I had spent over 5 years trying to fit into. I see, I managed, keeping my voice neutral. Thanks for letting me know, Mom. She must have sensed my hurt because she quickly added, it's just legal stuff, you know? It doesn't change how we feel about you, right? All right? I said, not really believing her. The conversation awkwardly drifted to other topics before ending, but the damage was done. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that familiar ache of not belonging. The weeks that followed were tough. I mulled over the conversation again and again. Part of me wanted to confront my stepdad, demand an explanation, or at least tell him how much he'd hurt me. But another part of me wondered why I even cared. I hadn't felt like a part of their family for years. Why was this any different? I decided to pull back, limit my visits even more. It was a defense mechanism, I guess, protecting myself from being hurt further by people who had already shown they didn't consider me family when it really counted. Then the actual wake-up call came. It wasn't a dramatic event, no yelling matches or tearful showdowns. It was quieter than that, more profound. I was at a coffee shop working on a term paper when I overheard a group at the next table. They were laughing and sharing stories about their families, the usual ups and downs, normal stuff, and it hit me. I didn't have that. I hadn't had it for a long time, if ever. That realization sparked something in me. I started to question why I was allowing myself to be upset over being excluded from a will when I had already been excluded from the family in every way that mattered. It wasn't about the money. It was about wanting to feel valued and loved by the people who were supposed to be my family. From then on, I made a conscious decision to focus on the relationships in my life that did make me feel valued. Friends who had become like family, professors who mentored me, colleagues who respected me. I invested more in those connections, and gradually, the hurt from my stepdad's will and the feeling of exclusion from my family began to fade. It wasn't an overnight change. There were still moments of bitterness, especially during family gatherings when I'd see my stepbrother and half-brother getting all the attention. But I was learning to accept that some things were out of my control, and where I could, I was building my own sense of family and belonging. The real test came when my stepdad's health scare passed, and life returned to normal for them. I was invited over for a family dinner celebration of sorts that he was doing better. I went more out of a sense of obligation than anything else. The dinner was as awkward as I expected. My stepdad talked about his recovery. Everyone gushed over my half-brother's latest school achievements, and my stepbrother bragged about a new job. I sat there mostly quiet, and it was clear I was the odd one out. But this time, it didn't hurt as much. I had reached a place of peace with my role in this family. I was the outsider, and that was okay, because outside that house, I had people who cared about me for me, not for what I could bring to a will or a family name. After dinner, I left early, making some excuse about an early morning. As I drove home, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was okay, really okay. For the first time in years, I had faced the reality of my situation, dealt with the emotional fallout, and come out the other side stronger and more self-assured. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that life has a funny way of throwing you surprises when you least expect it. After getting comfortable in my own routine and accepting the limited, if not strained, relationship with my family, I got a call one afternoon that turned everything on its head. The call was from a lawyer, someone I'd never heard of. Before the lawyer introduced himself in a formal, almost apologetic tone, he asked if I had a few minutes to discuss the estate of my grandaunt, my dad's mother's sister. Honestly, I barely remembered her. She was one of those relatives you hear about in stories from your parents, but don't really know. She had no children of her own, and I remembered her being mentioned as someone who helped raise my dad. I'm calling to inform you that your grandaunt passed away recently. The lawyer continued, his voice a mixture of professional and sympathetic. She left her entire estate to you. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I felt a mix of emotions, sadness for her passing, confusion about why she chose me, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility about what was coming next. The lawyer explained that my grandaunt had been quite well off, having invested wisely over her lifetime. She left behind a sizable estate, including a trust fund that was now mine, totaling around $3 million. Just like that, my financial situation changed overnight. After the call, I sat there, phone in hand, trying to process the news. Why me? We weren't close. I visited her a few times, sure, but those visits were more about checking in on an elderly relative than bonding. She must have seen something in me, maybe a reflection of her own independence. Or perhaps it was her way of reaching back to family one last time. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings with the lawyer, signing documents and learning exactly what I had inherited. It wasn't just money. There were properties, stocks, and a few personal items that held sentimental value. Among them was a letter she had written explaining her decision. She admired my independence and determination qualities, she said, reminded her of herself. At my age, equipped with this new wealth, I made some immediate changes. I bought a house, something I never thought I'd be able to afford on my own so soon. It was a modest place, but it was mine, and it represented a new chapter in my life. I also invested in a rental property, thinking ahead about long-term financial security. The rest of the money I put into savings and investments, consulting, with a financial advisor to ensure I was making smart choices. But with great wealth comes great responsibility, and as I soon found out, great drama. I hadn't told anyone in my family about the inheritance, wanting to avoid any potential fallout. However, secrets have a way of coming out, and this one was no different. It started with my cousin, who somehow got wind of the inheritance through mutual connections in the legal world. Before I knew it, my mom knew, and once she knew, it wasn't long before everyone else did too. Phone calls started coming in not just from her, but from my stepdad, my stepbrother, and even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone seemed to have a reason why they needed a piece of my inheritance. Times are tough, they'd say. Or you know how bad his health has been, referring to my stepdad. It was as if they all suddenly remembered I existed, but only as a bank. I was bombarded with requests for loans, gifts, and outright demands for money. It felt like I was watching vultures circling, each waiting for their chance to swoop in. The pressure was immense, and for a moment I faltered, wondering if I was being selfish by holding on to the inheritance. But then I remembered the years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, the years of scrimping and saving, working hard for every dime, and getting myself through college without their help. This was my chance to secure my future, and I wasn't going to let guilt or manipulation sway me. When my mom asked directly why I hadn't thought to share the news with her, I had enough. I explained calmly but firmly that the distance between us wasn't just physical, but emotional. Our decisions, and by extension those of my stepdad and stepbrother, had shown me where I stood with them. The inheritance was a chance for me to do things on my terms, without relying on anyone else. It's my life, I told her, and I need to live it my way. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but I have to do what's best for me now. The fallout from that conversation was as expected. Accusations of being ungrateful and selfish were thrown my way, but I held my ground. Over time, the calls became less frequent, and the requests for money dried up as they realized I wasn't budging. It was a tough lesson in who my real family was. It wasn't defined by blood or marriage, but by the people who supported me without expecting anything in return. Those were the relationships I valued and continued to nurture. As for the inheritance, it remained a bittersweet reminder of my journey. My grandaunt was a woman I wish I had known better. Her final gift was not just the wealth she left me, but also the clarity and conviction to stand up for myself, no matter the cost. The inheritance was supposed to be a blessing, a windfall from a distant relative who thought I might do something good with it. However, as soon as word got out that I was suddenly a few million richer, It felt less like a gift and more like I had painted a target on my back. After I made it clear to my mom and the rest of the family that I wasn't going to hand out cash just because we shared some DNA, things got chilly fast. The phone calls and texts that had initially been filled with thinly veiled hints for money turned into outright pleas and then into angry demands when I stood firm on my decision to keep my finances private. It wasn't just my immediate family either. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly very interested in reconnecting. I received messages like, "Hey, I just heard about Aunt so-and-so. I'm so sorry to hear she passed, but could you help me with some money? Times are tough." It was as if they all had the same script, only the names were changed. One of the toughest calls was from my stepdad. He had never been warm, but now he was cold and calculating. "You know, we've always considered you part of this family. It's only right you think of your brothers in this difficult time," he said one day, his voice dripping with guilt. I shot back. "My brothers haven't considered me family unless they needed something," surprising even myself with the sharpness of my tone. "That's a harsh way to put it," he retorted, but I could tell he was taken aback. I had never spoken to him like that before. I had always been the compliant stepchild, the one who didn't rock the boat too much. The conversation spiraled from there, with him accusing me of being selfish and me reminding him of all the times I had felt excluded and unimportant in his family. By the end, we were both too angry to see any reason, and the call ended with a mutual understanding that things between us would never be the same. The final straw came when my mom tried to mediate, which really meant taking my stepdad's side and trying to convince me to share my inheritance. It's what families do. She insisted during one particularly tense visit where she had shown up unannounced at my new house. "Families also support each other," I countered, feeling both exhausted and exasperated. "When have you ever supported me like this, emotionally or financially?" She was silent, unable to answer. The truth was, our relationship had been superficial at best for years. This money had just brought all the underlying issues to the surface. After she left, the calls and messages slowed, then stopped. It seemed they had finally accepted that I wasn't going to cave. It was a relief, but also a profound disappointment. It hurt to know that my value to them was tied so closely to what I could provide financially. In the wake of the family fallout, I began to invest more time in my relationships with friends and colleagues, people who appreciated me for who I was, not for my bank account. I also started volunteering, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the resources or time for before. Giving back on my own terms was healing in a way I hadn't expected. It helped me connect with people, build new friendships, and fill the void left by my family's conditional affection. I also saw a therapist who helped me work through the feelings of betrayal and abandonment that had resurfaced with this whole ordeal. It was tough unpacking years of emotional baggage, but it was necessary. I learned to set boundaries, to recognize the signs of manipulative behavior, and most importantly, to value my own needs and well-being. One day, I decided to write a letter to each family member who had tried to pressure me for money. In each letter, I explained my feelings, why I had made the decisions I did, and how their actions had affected me. It was more for my closure than anything. I didn't expect any responses. To my surprise, my half-brother replied. He was young, only 14, and his letter was clumsy but sincere. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. We started texting small conversations about school and his hobbies. It wasn't much, but it was something, a possible bridge to rebuilding at least one family connection. Update 1. Hey everyone, just wanted to update you all on what's been going on since I last posted. It's been a few weeks, and honestly, I wish I could say things have gotten better, but they've actually gone from bad to much worse. I appreciate all the support and advice you guys have given me. It's been a lifeline during this crazy time. After everything blew up with my family, my mom reached out to me in August, wanting to talk. Given everything that's happened, I had a strong hunch this wasn't going to be a simple catch-up. To keep things somewhat neutral, we decided to meet in a public place, hoping to minimize any drama or craziness. The meet was awkward from the start. My mom kicked things off by talking about how they've been struggling financially. She mentioned that my half-brother's private school fees had become a burden since my stepdad got sick and had his work hours cut. Then she shifted to discussing how they wanted to renovate the house and how she desperately needed a vacation to escape the mental toll of everything. Throughout all this, she didn't ask a single question about my life or how I was coping. It felt like I was just there to listen to her list of problems. I grew more uncomfortable as the conversation dragged on, feeling like a spectator to her woes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and asked her to just get to the point. Without missing a beat, she said she expected me to write her a check for $1 million. Yes, you read that right, $1 million. She claimed it should technically all be her money since it came from her late husband's inheritance. But she was being generous by only asking for a third. Her demands were becoming more and more outlandish, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. I quickly paid the bill and got out of there as fast as I could. Since that day, my mom has been going around calling me a thief, loudly proclaiming to anyone who will listen that the inheritance should have been hers in the first place. Meanwhile, my stepdad sent me a massive wall of text lecturing me about how I can't just think of myself when I'm part of a bigger family and that I should include everyone else in my decisions. I pointed out that he didn't include me in his will because I wasn't family enough, which seemed to shut him up temporarily, but I doubt it's the end of it. Things have spiraled into absolute madness since then. Both my mom and stepdad have been bad-mouthing me everywhere, and I'm honestly a bit scared about what they might do next. It feels like they are trying to turn everyone against me, painting me as the bad guy in a situation they've blown way out of proportion. I'm trying to stay strong and keep a level head, but it's tough when it feels like the people who are supposed to support you are making your life harder. I'll keep you all updated if anything changes, but right now, it's just one big mess. Thanks again for all your support and advice. It really helps to know there are people out there who understand and care. Update. Hey everyone, I'm dropping in again for a big update. Trust me, it's been a whirlwind these past few weeks, and honestly, I'm just trying to keep my head above water with all the crazy stuff that's been happening. I really appreciate all the support and advice you all have been giving me. It's been a huge help in navigating this chaos, so thank you a ton. Here's the scoop. A few weeks back, out of nowhere, I received a super official-looking letter in the mail. It was from some lawyer I've never heard of, claiming that my mom is suing me for a huge chunk of my inheritance. Yeah, you heard? That right, my own mom is suing me. My initial reaction? It's full-blown panic. I mean, who wouldn't freak out? My mind raced at the thought of all the legal battles I'd have to face. But just when I thought it couldn't get any more soap opera-worthy, my stepdad sent me this ominous text saying, "You'll regret not sharing your money, because now we're going to take you for everything you're worth." It felt like something out of a bad movie, like the villainous step-parent twisting the knife. Seriously, the audacity had my jaw on the floor. I was rattled, but not beaten. I sent everything over to my attorney, expecting a whole ordeal. But, get this, my attorney literally laughed when he read the letter, not just a chuckle, but a full-on, "Are you kidding me?" kind of laugh. He tossed the letter into the trash and told me not to lose any sleep over it. According to him, my grandparents' will is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. There's no way my mom can touch anything, legally, because she isn't even a descendant, and the will clearly spells that out. My attorney is the thorough kind of guy, and he didn't stop at just the letter. He dug a bit deeper into this so-called lawyer who sent it. It turns out the office address listed is in some run-down building that looks like it hasn't seen a tenant in years, and the phone number is disconnected, no longer in service. It looks like my parents got desperate and decided to hire some flee-by-night, probably not even legitimate lawyer in a last-ditch effort to scare me into coughing up some cash. Realizing they were just trying to bluff me into surrendering part of my inheritance was both a relief and a wake-up call. They actually thought they could strong-arm me with some half-baked legal threat. Can you believe the nerve? Knowing this lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I had been gearing up for a legal showdown, but now I'm just shaking my head at the lengths they would go to. With that drama sort of deflated, I decided I needed a break from all the madness. I've been on edge, losing sleep, and just generally stressed out. I talked it over with my buddies, and we all agreed it was time for a little getaway. So I'm taking some time off work to go traveling with my friends next week. Nothing fancy. Just a road trip to some places we've always talked about visiting but never got around to. I think a change of scenery is exactly what I need to clear my head and recharge. It's weird though, thinking about how things have unfolded. I used to look up to my mom and stepdad, and now seeing how they've acted is just disappointing. I'm learning that sometimes you have to step back from the people who are supposed to support you when they start pulling you down instead. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to this trip, a bit of adventure, some good laughs, and quality time with friends. Just what the doctor ordered to get away from the family drama. I'll keep you all posted on how it goes and if anything else pops up on the home front. But for now, I'm focusing on the positive and moving forward, not letting this whole mess drag me down anymore.